Hello, my name's Richard Felix and I'm the paranormal historian on the TV programme Most Haunted. Over the past 15 years I've been conducting ghost tours and investigations in well over 500 reputedly haunted locations. As a historian, I tend to use the more traditional methods, the power of the mind, glass divination, seance, table tilting, crystals and divining rods. I thought that it was long overdue that we tried to teach people how to become a paranormal investigator. And I've invited Anne Winsper and Steve Parsons of Parascience, who in my opinion is probably one of the very best paranormal groups in the country. You may also recognise Steve from Most Haunted. They've come along today to join with me here in Derby Jail, which is, in my opinion, one of the most haunted places in the country. And they're going to help me to teach you how to become a paranormal investigator. So, Steve, Anne, welcome to Derby Jail. I believe to be one of the most haunted buildings in the whole of the country. The best place I think we could use for demonstrating the equipment that you've got with you today. So I think without further ado, we need to go inside and get demonstrating. So tell me, Steve, is it true you've got 27 boxes like that full of equipment?
No, it's not, Richard, it's a myth. There's 33 boxes like that.
No.
Several bags and some other flight cases.
So you've obviously got far more equipment than anybody else in the country.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that any environmental variable that takes place inside Derby Jail that you can name, we can measure properly and scientifically.
Wow. So how come you've only got one box with you today?
Because basically that's all you need. Everything that you need to do a proper paranormal investigation can be contained in just one box. We use a lot more because we spend a long time and look in depth.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, an awful lot of people, they'll conduct an investigation, it'll be a 24-hour investigation. You can take months, years? Years!
In some cases, years, because our methods require that we take long-term measurements. And to be realistic with you, it can be 3 or 4 visits before we even know what the normal rattles, bumps and squeaks of a building are.
Yeah, like we've got today, we've got footsteps, bumps.
They could be so easily misinterpreted.
Yeah. Motors, engines, building work outside, all sorts of things. Wow. So, come on, I mean, how do we start? You know, teach me to be a paranormal investigator.
Okay, well the very first and most important thing about a paranormal investigation is to put the equipment away and not even use it.
Right.
There's so much work to do before you even think about the equipment. The first thing you need to do is speak to the witnesses and find out what's been going on. See if people are reporting things in the same place, see if they're reporting the same things. Speak to as many witnesses as you can. Then ask them to keep a diary of any events that are going on in the location. See if there's patterns to what's happening. See if things happen at a certain time of day. See if things are happening to certain people. And then, once you've got the diary, you can go and look at the history of the place. See if what they're reporting is tying in with the history of the building. See if it all ties together. And you need to do all this work before you even think about the equipment, because we need to place the equipment. We need to be measuring for variables, but there's no point measuring for something if there hasn't been an event happening there.
Of course.
Can you imagine the scenario? We arrive with 30 odd boxes of equipment and we scatter it throughout a location. We put it in every nook and cranny in the jail, for example. Yeah. We would end up with a huge amount of data. Yeah. So much information, it would take us 10 years to interpret it. Yeah. So what we have to do is we use the information from the witnesses to give us clues about what we should be looking for, where we should be looking for it, and when we should be looking for it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So in other words, a guy comes here and tells us that he's seen on 3 occasions a figure walking through the wall or wherever it is. Then you obviously need to Well,
When did he see it? What time of day did he see it? Were there any other witnesses? Does that tie in with the history of the building? If the figure walked through a wall, did there used to be a doorway there?
Exactly.
You need to find all
Yeah.
this
And you need
information out
cameras.
Yeah.
If it wasn't made, did it have sound? Was it without sound? Because if there was no sound, then we don't need to record it.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, indeed.
So
If it's just
again,
an
lots of
apparition
equipment,
that was
yeah.
seen, then you obviously
Don't
only
need
need a camera.
If it's voices heard and footsteps heard, then we don't need cameras.
Mm.
So
Exactly.
we're able to focus the information from equipment more in a more controlled and careful manner, and that way we can use that data then.
Yeah, I see. So once you've done your initial investigation, your interview with witnesses, you've sort of ascertained parts of the building that need investigation. Where do we go from there? What happens next?
We go fishing.
So, Anne, Steve said that we're going fishing.
We are going
I mean,
fishing.
what on earth does that mean?
Well, you won't need your rod.
Oh, that's something. Not a very good fisherman, anyway.
That's okay. Right, when we go to a building for the first time, we need to find out what our people are going to experience there.
Your people.
Our investigators.
I see, yeah.
We've got a team of investigators, and we want to see if they're experiencing similar sort of things in the location that the witnesses have reported.
Right.
Now, obviously, we don't want to tell them what the witnesses have reported.
Otherwise they'll report the same
Otherwise
thing.
they'll report
Yeah.
the same thing, obviously. So what we'll do, we'll position them round a building. We won't tell them if they're in a supposedly haunted area or a not haunted area, but we want them to tell us what's going on, what they're feeling, what they're seeing, any emotions they're experiencing. I want them to paint me a picture of what's going on. We give them paperwork to fill in.
Yeah.
On the paperwork, they need to tell us, obviously, where they are, how they feel about the location, any physical feelings in that location. Do they feel tired? Do they feel scared? Have they got a headache? Anything at all that they feel in that location. And then we can take all those reports and try and tie them back to any of the witness reports and see if there's patterns there. They might be different from witness reports, but we might have members of our team reporting the same things from the same areas. And that will give us an idea that there's something going on there that we need to look at, and that we can bring the equipment in and see if we can measure something in that location.
I see. So for instance, I mean, on frequent occasions here, a guy's been seen wandering around here. This was once a corridor, and he's been seen wearing a red coat. Soldier, ex-jailer that wears his coat from when he was in the army or whatever. So you'd sort of position people and wait to see it, without telling them, of course, that this guy's been
We'd
seen.
position some people so they could see the area where something happened, but we'd position people all around the area as well. And we'd rotate people through the positions during the night, and they do reports from each position. And then we can collate all the reports at the end of the night.
Then you see whether two people have reported similar, as well as the witnesses that probably saw it before.
Exactly.
Does this genuinely happen? Do people really report the phenomena that other people have seen? Do you get that?
Definitely.
Really?
Yes. Even from little things like people will sit in a corridor and they'll put on their reports, oh, my ears kept popping and I was getting a terrible headache. And we find that when we put other people in that corridor, they're reporting the same things. And that might be witnesses say, oh, I don't like walking down that corridor, I get a headache. And if we've got a group of people all reporting the same thing from that area, there's something going on there. It might be paranormal, it might be environmental, but there's something going on that we can look at.
So in other words, that starts the alarm bells going, and that means that's where you can go and start the investigation properly.
Exactly.
With equipment.
Exactly.
To see why those people are reporting that phenomena.
Yes.
Which, as you've just said, may not be paranormal.
They may not be. It might be paranormal. But at least there's something happening that we can then have a look at and see
and you can go to that location and that's where you start.
Yes.
Got you. So, Steve,
What's
in the box?
What's in the box? Well, surprisingly little, actually. Just the
I don't know.
Yeah, it might look impressive, but this is probably a lot more than most amateur investigators would need. But it serves us well. It gives it's divided up fairly roughly. We have temperature, humidity, EMF, electromagnetic fields, radiation, wind speed, some basic motion detectors, and a couple of torches.
And are we going to get through most of this today?
The important bits. The important bits.
Wow. Where do we start?
I think on any investigation, two of the most commonly reported phenomena have to be temperature drops and sudden movement of air, breezes, drafts. And I think they're the first two we should look at.
Okay.
So we would start off. There are two types of thermometer that we would use. I'll take this one out first, just for ease, and just lay it to one side for a minute.
Yep.
And reach for the one that probably most people would be familiar with.
Yep.
And this is the one that they've seen us use on the show.
Yep.
They'll have seen it on other programs too, and they may even have one already themselves.
Yeah.
It's called simply a non-contact thermometer, quite simply because there is no probe that touches anything, and it's able, at the front of it, there's a window.
Yep.
And very similar in design to a motion sensor of a burglar or alarm.
Right.
It sees the world in heat.
Yes.
So it sees the world as a series of infrared emissions, because everything gives off infrared heat energy.
Yeah.
Instead of being able to trip an alarm, set off a siren, ring a bell, this can display that energy as a temperature readout.
Right.
And quite simply, you aim it at whatever you're interested in measuring, and you read the display. It has a laser, and that just simply allows me, the red dot, simply allows me, in fact I can put it onto my hand, it simply allows me to know where I'm pointing the thermometer.
Yes, exactly. Now, one big thing, is that measuring the temperature where the spot is? In other words, your hand, or is it measuring the temperature in an area around where your hand is?
That's a really good question. Because many people, one of them, again, commonly reported from is cold spots.
Yes.
Now, this device sees heat. So it's looking at things. It's looking at infrared. It sees the world in infrared.
Yeah.
But it can only see solid objects. So it's only measuring the temperature of the first solid surface it comes across.
Right.
The gap in between, it's blind. It can't see it at all.
Right.
So it can't measure a cold spot in the air between my hand
Right.
and the thermometer.
So someone says, "Oh my God, can you feel the cold spot here? There's something standing in this corner. There's a figure here," and a medium says, "I can see it," and they put their hand out and they feel.
And everybody
the cold.
points the thermometers at it.
And you point your thermometer at it. It's actually recording the temperature
Of the wall,
of the wall
behind, or the medium, or whatever.
Hang on a
whatever
minute,
the
the
temperature.
wall's cold.
Exactly. So unless you use the right thermometer, you're not going to get the right measurements.
Gotcha.
So we would use, in that case,
Ah.
an air probe thermometer.
Yes.
Now this is a slightly different device. It uses, if I can plug it in, never get it right first time. It has a little plug,
Yes.
which goes in there. This has on the end. There's lots of different versions. This is just called a thermocouple version,
Right.
and it has on the end of it a little tiny blob of metal.
Yes. Got it.
That blob of metal is the junction of two metals, and it's very, very sensitive to changes in temperature.
Right.
So that if we held that into that space,
Right. So I hold that there. Where someone says, "Oh, can you feel the cold spot here?"
wherever you put the tip of
So
that
I put it there.
into fresh air, it will measure the temperature and display it
Really.
on the display. So that's for measuring cold spots in the air.
Which is really what it's all about.
Exactly.
How interesting. There you go. So again, what should the temperature be? A normal temperature in this corner.
Well, what you would have to do beforehand is, first of all, establish what is normal for that building.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Yes.
Is it winter? So we would also take the temperature outside.
Yeah.
And when we talk about doing baseline measurements, you don't do the baseline measurements before the start of an investigation and put all the equipment away. You do the baseline measurements throughout the investigation, because they are your running baseline by which you compare all your other measurements against.
Right, big question. Perhaps I shouldn't be asking this. What is a baseline test? What does it mean?
A baseline test is simply a series of tests that we can do. We can do them by taking people's notes of the mental states of how people are feeling, whether they're happy, comfortable, which
Right.
we've talked about earlier. It's recording all the things we're interested in measuring, be it temperature, EMF, humidity, light, and just getting the normals, having a sensor recording all of the time so that you can see if there are any changes in it, to see what's normal for that particular part of the building. Because interestingly as well is that thermometer, that tip there, is only measuring the temperature literally at the tip.
Yes, of course.
So it's not telling me the temperature way over there in the corner of the jail.
No.
It's telling me the temperature right where I put it.
Yes, indeed.
And people have got to remember that these machines are very precise, but only if they're used properly.
Yes, indeed, yeah. So, the temperature in this room now is, what would be...
Well, today it's we're in late August.
Yeah.
It's sunny and dry outside, and the temperature currently is 21.7
Right.
at that spot.
At that
But
spot.
interestingly, the walls
Yes, that's...
won't be the same
No,
temperature.
of course not.
Because of
it's
course
cold stone, isn't it?
it's cold stone. But at night, for example, when the sun's been shining on a stone or a brick wall, it'll warm it up,
Yes.
and that will slowly release. I mean, for thousands of years, people use that as a main form of heating.
Yeah.
The big brick fireplace through the centre of the building.
Correct.
Hot air also rises, so the ceiling, the higher up we go with a sensitive thermometer, it will be colder at the floor, it'll be warmer at the ceiling. And of course, windows, they allow cold air to penetrate as well.
Yeah.
So there isn't a constant temperature throughout the space.
No. So, for the paranormal investigator that goes into a building and someone says there's a dramatic drop in temperature in that corner, and at the moment the temperature in here is, say, 21 degrees.
Right, it's 21.1,
Right.
0.2 there, and the stone is 18.6.
Obviously colder. What would be a drop in temperature that could signify that there was something paranormal happening? How many, in other words, Mr. Paranormal Investigator, what does he have to look for? 21 degrees now, I'm standing there saying, gosh, it's much colder here.
Right.
How many degrees lower should it be?
There isn't a hard and fast rule.
No.
I wish there were.
Yeah.
But what we do have is we can try with the baseline. So for example, if we open a window and it's -3 outside because it's a winter's night, then you will get the sudden rush of cold air.
Yeah.
But you won't see very dramatic temperature changes. For me personally, and within Parascience, what we look for is something where the inside temperature, say the temperature in this room, has fallen below the temperature of the outside air.
Right.
Because if we open every door and window, after a period of hours, the temperature will stabilise inside and out.
Yes, of course.
In other words, the temperature in here can never be any lower than the temperature is outside.
Yeah, I see.
But we have recorded objectively with equipment at locations that have a reputation to be haunted. Temperature drops where the temperature has dropped more than 10 degrees Celsius below the temperature of the outside air.
Right, I see.
The laws of physics suggest that's impossible.
Really?
Because if you opened every door and window and the temperature was freezing outside, eventually it would become freezing inside.
Yeah.
It would become -9 or -10.
I see. So, if you were doing an investigation, someone said, I feel a cold spot there, you put that in it, and say there was a drop of 2 degrees. Obviously there has to be a reason why there's a drop.
Yeah.
Would that be enough for you to say,
No,
that's...
It
Could be
depends
paranormal.
again if we've looked for the cause.
Yeah, exactly.
Are
There
they
is no
standing?
cause.
Are they standing next to the air brick?
Yeah, there is no cause. It just happens to have dropped 2 degrees while we're standing here.
Over what period of time?
Over the time we've been talking now.
That would make me interested.
I see. So 2
But
degrees.
2 degrees over an hour wouldn't.
No, that's where I'm coming from.
2
yeah.
degrees over 5 minutes would make me interested, providing I'd ruled out open windows, drafts.
Yeah. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, for a would-be paranormal investigator...
They have to use their judgment.
Yeah.
They can't just immediately go, oh, the temperature's dropped, that must be paranormal.
No.
The temperature's dropped. What the paranormal explanation has to be the least likely.
I know.
So once you've exhausted all the other explanations,
You then look for something
then
that
you
might
exactly
be paranormal.
Exactly. But 2 degrees in a couple of minutes, if there were no immediately obvious causes, there are some of the more esoteric laws of physics, the Peltier effect, for example, which we'll come to later maybe when we talk about EMF, that could do that without an immediate cause. But using other equipment, we can test for that too.
Gotcha. Now we're all staring at a very strange piece of machinery here. What is it?
It's a remarkably simple piece of equipment. It tells us if there's a draft.
All right.
Because quite often people say, oh, did you feel that sudden draft?
Frequently.
But as scientists, it's insufficient for us to go, yeah, there's a brick over there with a hole in it, it's coming through there. We have to be able to measure it and quantify the amount. This is called a hot wire anemometer. Simply, it has a very, very fine wire in the tip.
Yeah.
That's many times thinner than a human hair.
Wow.
The device heats that wire up to a constant temperature. Any movement of the wind, of course, will cool it down again.
I see.
Needing more electricity into the wire to warm it back up. That electrically can then be related to the speed of the draft. It's an extremely sensitive device.
Expensive?
No, less than £100. Very, very useful device. The shape of it allows it to be put into many locations, up and down. Currently, we're in the museum part of Derby Jail, and we're facing the large doorway opposite the condemned cell, and air is moving in here, and it's moving at about 0.3 metres per second,
Right.
Which is about a quarter of a mile an hour, and that's why maths is very wrong.
I see.
You talk about objects moving, and one of the things we mustn't overlook, and what this meter is showing me, that as we move around through a space, as people walk past us, they of course are moving air around.
Of course.
Them. And this meter shows that too.
And it's even me moving around
Even
like
you
this
moving now is generating 0.05 metres per
so
second.
I'm causing a breeze.
Exactly. Now,
Yeah.
it's dark, we know it's a haunted location, people are going to be hypersensitive.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
So, in addition to measuring the movement of air inside a building, quite often it's attributable to drafts coming through windows, doors.
Of course.
So this meter allows us to get up close, to measure the actual speed coming through a window, through an air brick perhaps. But also importantly, and again as part of the baselines, we have another device. And we'll go outside and we'll show you this one being used.
Okay, come on.
This is the other item of equipment about it tells you about inside.
Yeah.
Again, talking about drafts coming through doors and windows, then obviously if it's windy outside, there's going to be draft here inside.
Of course.
So as part of our baselines, we use a different form of anemometer. This is called a rotating vane. Unfortunately today it's not very windy, but essentially the vane is blown round by the wind and gives us a reading of how fast the wind is going.
Right.
It's as simple as that. We take these measurements approximately hourly as part of the baselines. Somebody goes outside, notes down the wind speed on both sides of a building, so we know, because a building it might be different on one side than on the other.
Yeah.
And we use that as part of our baselines.
I see. So, but the big thing about this is then that you have to keep doing it. There's no
Absolutely.
point in doing it when you arrive at the building and going home again 24 hours later.
Many's a time we started an investigation, as we've been here today. It was lovely and sunny earlier, a little bit of a breeze. Now we're overcast, we're just starting to rain, there's no breeze at all.
No.
So the weather does have an effect on the climate inside a building. And so as part of the baselines, it's important to note the weather and to note the changing weather conditions.
And to keep doing it
Absolutely.
during the investigation, all the way through the investigation.
Absolutely, at regular intervals.
And noting it down,
Yes.
making records.
Keep a record. Now that we've seen how to measure temperature, it's important to know why we're measuring the temperature. We need to get the baseline readings. Steve mentioned baseline readings. Everywhere that we have investigators sitting, they need to be measuring the temperatures at regular intervals. We suggest every 15 minutes, just for an ordinary baseline. They need to record those measurements, keep a note of them, so we have an idea of what's been going on in that location throughout the whole investigation. Now, if they feel that the temperature is starting to change in any way, whether it's going down or indeed going up, which it sometimes might do, they need to start taking more regular readings. If the temperature is changing, we need to know how it's changing and how fast it's changing. We would expect people, if they suddenly start to feel cold, to keep a constant eye on the thermometer, maybe make a note of the readings every 5 seconds or so, so we can see if there is something happening. Why do we actually want to measure the temperature? One of the most commonly reported experiences when a paranormal event has happened is a change in temperature. It's usually reported as a drop in temperature. Sometimes, but not very often, it's a raise in temperature, but it's certainly a change in the environment. Now, you might find people are sitting in a room and they say, it's suddenly gone really cold in here. You're checking your thermometer and nothing's changed, but the people are feeling really cold. Now, there can be reasons for this. First of all, a lot of the time, you're doing an investigation overnight. If you're staying up all night, you're going to be getting more and more tired as the night wears on. As you get tired, your body temperature drops. Your body temperature always drops just before you go to sleep. As a tip, if you have trouble going to sleep, open your windows and have a cool, tepid bath before you go to bed, and it will help you drop off to sleep.
That's nice to know.
So you might find that you're feeling cold because your body temperature is dropping, and it's not the environment around you that's changing in temperature.
Tiredness.
It's just tiredness.
Wow. I didn't realise that. That's amazing. Tell me something though. You mentioned temperature rising and can. I mean, it's not normally associated, is it, with ghosts or paranormal activity? It's usually the fact that the temperature's dropped because, in my opinion, an entity or something is drawing the heat or the energy from the room to use for to either appear, to move something. And of course that means a drop in temperature because it's drawing the heat.
I wouldn't like to put an explanation on why it's dropping, but usually people report drops in temperature. But there are occasional reports of rises in temperature.
That could be paranormal?
That could be paranormal, because
Really?
we certainly can't find an explanation for it. One thing it's really important to realise, though, is that people are quite bad at judging changes in temperature, because it's not something we tend to do in everyday life. And the same with drafts. When you're sitting at home watching the telly, unless you've got an icy draft blowing through, you don't tend to notice the little subtle changes in the environment, which are happening all the time. So another thing I'd suggest is when you're sitting at home, try and become aware of the environment around you, all the little temperature changes and the little drafts that you don't feel when you're sitting at home, but when you're sitting in a haunted environment with nothing to distract your attention, you become very aware of them.
Really? Yeah. But again, as Steve's already said, the last thing you really have to look for is something paranormal.
Absolutely.
Because most of the time it can be explained.
Most of the time you can explain it, but that makes it even better, because the ones that you can't explain, they're really interesting.
Yeah. And
So don't be discouraged if you can explain things. That's half the fun.
Of course it is. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Finding out what causes things.
Yeah.
This, Richard, has to be probably the most commonly used and most misunderstood items of ghost hunting equipment, the EMF meter.
Tell me something, Steve. What is an electromagnetic field?
It's very, very simple. As the name says, it's actually two fields, an electric field and a magnetic field.
Right.
An electric field exists every time a wire or an appliance or an object has got an electrical potential, a voltage in it. So, for example, you and I
was just going to say,
our
we
nervous
have.
system has electricity inside it.
You were telling me the other day that each of us, emit something like 2 kilowatts of electricity a day. Is that right?
That's right. Now, a magnetic field exists whenever, unless we're talking about fixed permanent magnets that they use in compasses, for example, but a magnetic field can only exist when electricity flows. So the electric fields are present all the time, and whenever electricity flows, it creates a magnetic field around it.
Oh, right.
So when you turn, if we measure a wire, for example,
Yes.
when it's plugged into the wall and the switch is off, there will be an electric field surrounding the wire. When we turn the switch on and current flows through the wire, a magnetic field is formed and we have an electromagnetic field.
Oh, I see.
That's
right.
as simple as that.
But that is not a ghost detector.
It's absolutely, unless the laws of physics are in some way being defeated, and to the best of our knowledge they aren't, ghosts don't emit electromagnetic fields, or disrupt them, or bend them, or do anything else. But there is a very, very sound scientific principle why ghost hunters should be very, very interested in measuring EMF.
Right.
I'm talking about EMF as in what comes off wires, cables, people, electrical appliances, even some distance away, overhead pylons, underfloor cables. We need to know the measurements.
Right.
For a very, very good reason, because they affect the brain.
Now, while I've got you, Steve, you've got your EMF meter with you. This, one of the cells still preserved here at Derby Jail, the number of people that have problems in here, nausea, headaches, bursting into tears, and leaving the room because they can't stay in there any longer. Could this be caused by EMF, for instance, in the room, in the cell?
Those sorts of effects could be suggestive of EMF.
Yeah.
But we don't have to speculate, we can find out.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Exactly. So, I'm quite interested to see what you think.
Again, taking it just about eye level.
Yeah.
And because people are not going to be walking around at the ceiling height.
See, there is electricity in here.
There is electricity, there is an EMF in here. It's currently around between 2.5 and 3.5 milligauss.
Right.
So through the centre section, also people will be sitting down.
Yes, correct.
So,
of course, there is a wire there, you see.
So I'll adjust the height of the meter for that.
Yeah.
And I did notice that right in this corner, it's going up a little bit. We're quite close to the wire now, and we're still only 3.5.
Which is nothing, is it?
Which is nothing. I mean, there are other possibilities that could cause those symptoms that you describe. Infrasound being one of them.
Of course, yeah.
But certainly today, while we're making the measurements, there is no significant EMF in this.
So in other words, at the moment, we can rule out EMF causing the paranormal activity, if you like.
That's only valid for the measurement period.
Yeah.
So, for example, in 6 hours' time, somebody might turn on an appliance in another room or above us, and that may cause high EMF.
Right. So again, we have
That's
to investigate for a long period of time.
Exactly, and it does show the importance of baselines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because we could do a baseline as is done. I've measured in there. The EMF is only 2 milligauss, and in 6 hours' time it could be 100 milligauss.
I see.
And people would report effects, and we would miss because the baseline doesn't show it. I measured it 6 hours ago, and it was fine.
Yeah. Now, Steve, the other thing you mentioned earlier was the Peltier effect.
Yeah, this is actually probably more simply described as electrical cooling. We can measure, partially measure it with an EMF meter, for example, because an EMF meter measures electric fields and magnetic fields. So the Peltier effect works by the flow of electrons from one conductor to another conductor draws heat with it. It's as simple as that. So, for example, if floor material, like a stone, is wet, it will conduct electricity. The electricity, as it goes to ground, will draw heat through it, and you can get localized cold spots.
Oh, really? So it draws the heat away from the surface of the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I've very much oversimplified it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But if you get sudden cold spots, small localized, it may not be still paranormal. There may not be any doors and windows open, but using an EMF meter and you find some abnormality in the reading at the same place, it could be caused by the Peltier effect.
Interesting.
But as I say, I have horribly oversimplified the physics there.
So basically, 8 out of 10 ghosts can be explained. It's the other 2 that we've really got to worry about.
Yeah. It's very important that the equipment is used properly. And we're not using the equipment primarily to rubbish people's experiences, but only by correct and proper use of the equipment, by finding the true cause, can we say that the remaining 1 or 2% that are left, and that we do actually see anomalies. That we can't say that they're paranormal, but we can say we've measured them properly. We can't currently explain them. It's not sufficient to go, oh, there's a draft from over there. Oh, the EMF reading went to 20. You've got to look for the cause, and you've got to identify the cause.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So you want to be a ghost hunter?
Of course.
Well, why don't you join us, the rest of the Parascience team, up at Camelot Shipyard in Birkenhead for a full night's investigation.
That would be absolutely amazing. Yeah, sooner the better. Fantastic. Hello, you two.
Hi again.
How are you?
Very well.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again.
This is it then?
Welcome to our investigation.
Oh my gosh, it's just getting dark.
Yeah. Some of the team are already in position.
Right.
We've got to go through a bit of a briefing with you first. You want to be a ghost hunter? We'll teach you how.
I want to be one. Come on, let's go in. Okay, come on, tell me all about it then.
Well, the first and the most important thing, of course, is safety.
Yeah.
You'll see the team. Now, we'll be using night vision for making this DVD production.
Yep.
And we know that if we're wearing our reflective jackets, then they're going to bounce back off the infrared light. So that's why Anne and I and yourself are not wearing reflective jackets, which we normally would do.
Yes.
Simple reason, two reasons. Safety, in the dark, it's if there's a problem, we can see where people are. And secondly, ghosts don't wear them.
Correct.
So if somebody inadvertently strays into a photograph or a video, we know it's not the ghost. We know it's one of the team because they've got the fluoro jacket on.
Isn't there a third reason as well? So the ghost can see you?
Well, possibly. There are some important safety issues. We are going to be working in darkness.
Yep.
Not on this floor, but upstairs because there's a problem with the electrics. Water has got into the system, so we can't have the lights on. There's no real reason to investigate ghosts in the dark anyway.
No, I know, I realise
They're
that.
just as likely to turn up by day, by night. The reason we're here tonight is simply it's when the staff aren't here, and of course we're not interfering with what they do.
Of course, yeah.
So we would ask you to stay with one of us or another team member, and we have radios so that we can stay in touch for safety reasons. We've showed you where all the toilets are. We should get rid of the coffee cups because we've got some gadgets for you to play with.
Jolly good.
So we'll start off with an EMF meter
An
for
EMF
you.
meter.
Your very own EMF meter.
Yes, thank you very much.
You'll need that.
Great.
And your very own thermometer.
Thank you, sir.
Now later on, don't think it's all gadgets because later on Anne's got quite a lot of paperwork you're going to have to go through.
I know.
You don't get away without the paper.
But what we're going to do first of all is going to have a run through because
Yes, of
the
course.
team are investigating already upstairs.
Yep.
You haven't used any of these sort of stuff before. Now, we know there are some EMF anomalies in this building and we know what the causes are. They're natural, they're man-made causes.
Yeah.
So we're not worried about them, but we're hoping that you'll be able to find it.
Okay.
So if we've gone up the corridor, we'll give you a run with the meter. Richard, we've already talked at Derby Jail about EMF meters and why we use them. So this is an EMF meter. It's a basic model, but it's perfectly adequate for baseline observations of a location.
Yeah. I've not seen it. I mean, it looks quite good. It's chunky.
Yeah, nice and easy, big display.
Because you must remember that as paranormal historian, I'm the guy that's used to using crystals, dowsing rods, hazel twigs, and all that sort of stuff.
This will give you more objective information.
Oh yeah, yes, of course. But I mean, it just looks a good one.
It's a very robust, good meter.
Yeah.
It's a good beginner's meter.
So how do we use it?
Essentially, as we showed you at Derby, is we're interested in electromagnetic effects on the brain.
Right.
And so it's no use us waving it round. So what we tend to do is we tend to walk along and just look at the reading and have the meter just around head height.
Yeah.
And half arm's length away.
Yeah. Can I just say something about all this? This is not a ghost meter.
Absolutely not.
In other words, if someone says to me, there's a ghost standing by that door now,
I will put it on your head.
yeah, the last thing I do is take this and go over here.
Exactly.
Oh, where's the ghost? That's not what it's all about, is it?
No. Because it's the effects of the electromagnetism on the brain.
Exactly.
That is the reason why parapsychologists are measuring EMF. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to find those effects in the field.
Yes. So in other words, if there's something going on here, there's ghosts been seen round this part of the building, we have to look for something
that could be
is
affecting
causing
us.
So the only time I'd take this to the ground was if someone was lying down there.
Absolutely. Or
if one of the ways you could use it, for example, is if we can see a slightly high reading,
Yeah.
it would be nice to know where it's coming from, the source.
Yeah.
So we can move once we it's a bit high now. We can then follow by moving the meter around higher and lower. We can look at the readings. I said readings are getting higher, higher, higher. But we're getting there, and eventually we can find out where the wire is, or where the source of the electromagnetism is.
Yes, I see.
And that's how we would use it.
Right.
Now we know from our own measurements that we're very close to an electromagnetic anomaly. So let's see. We give you the meter.
Okay.
We're set to measure milligauss.
Now this is switched on.
Switch on, ready to
On,
go.
next question. What's the difference? What is a milligauss? What does it mean?
It's simply a unit of measurement.
Right.
Milligauss is a slightly older unit of measurement and still much favoured by American investigators.
Right.
Over in the UK and in Europe, we tend to favour the SI unit, which is the Tesla, or the
Which it
micro
says on here as
Tesla.
well.
Simply a button you can select between the two modes.
Right. And what's it on at the moment?
We use milligauss because so much of the investigation material is still done in milligauss, because so many groups still work in milligauss. It's just easier than doing the conversion.
Gotcha. So it's a case of someone's seen a ghost over here. I'm now looking to see if there's a reason. That
All you have to do
the brain's
now
been affected.
is
Yeah.
All you have to do now is look at that
Yep.
reading, move the meter
And
around,
it's on 7 at the moment. 3, 5,
keep moving
7,
it round.
10, 4, 6, 9, 12, 9,
So it's
15,
getting higher.
18. No,
So
hold it still. 21,
down a bit.
24, 50.
224.
But of course, we are
192.
going down towards a.
There's a
hang on,
socket there.
It's going down now
going down.
to the socket.
So
So,
the
it's not
high,
the socket.
so the high point is here then.
So, I mean, 143 here.
So there's a large electromagnetic field about head height,
Yeah.
and we're right in an area where there's a lot of paranormal reports.
Right. So it's pretty obvious that it says to me. I mean, it's not a wire that's going through here, because we take it down to the socket and it goes right down to 2.
Well, that socket's turned off, but it would. So there
But
would.
yeah, but there still should be.
But you can check it. Yeah, it's turned off.
Yeah.
Check it.
Okay. Oh, it's no.
Still
2.
no effect.
It's
That's
very
because
low.
the wiring's in good condition.
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
building.
But here, 124, 9500. I mean, so there's something going on here.
Yeah.
Tell me, go on.
On the other side of that wall is a very, very large electric switching unit,
Okay.
and that's
246.
generating a large amount of EMF.
Now tell me something else. This is Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Is some of that switched off?
Most of it is switched off.
So you can get an even
And so
higher
during
reading
the
in the daytime.
we've been here when the staff have been in during the day. We've seen readings over 700.
Right.
And
Which is huge.
it's probably the reason why most of the staff in this area are having their paranormal experiences.
Right. I see. Another question about this. What should a normal reading be in a building?
Well, that depends, because modern buildings are full of computers and televisions and all manner of electrical appliances. So the normal is whatever your baseline says it is.
Gotcha.
That's why you do a baseline.
Yeah.
And you don't
You
do
keep
it.
doing it.
You keep doing it because things get turned on and off. These are radios. If I use my radio now
Yeah.
while you're holding the meter,
Yeah.
you see it jump
Oh, it's gone right
up.
up 65.
Exactly. Because these generate an EMF. So
I see.
if you're using a radio, and a lot of investigators do use radios these days, you will see large EMF spikes.
Yeah.
And you've got to be aware that the equipment you're using will actually generate an EMF.
What about the business of the people saying if there are pylons nearby, overhead wires from pylon, does that make a difference?
Oh yes, if you took that meter out under a pylon or
Yes.
or near a big powerful supply like that,
Yeah.
you would see a large electromagnetic
Which again
field.
could cause problems.
It could, and in fact there are some people, some universities who are investigating health issues related to
Yeah,
that
exactly.
sort of
Oh, yeah.
exposure.
Yeah, I see. So that's the real use
Absolutely.
of an EMF meter.
It's a very good tool, because when we first investigated the case, the staff called us in because in this area of the building there were a lot of paranormal reports. People were having unusual sensations, feelings of nervousness, somebody nearby to them. They were seeing apparitions, and EMF causes sensory hallucinations.
Right. Yeah.
All 5 senses.
Yeah. and that could be a reason. Look at it, absolutely amazing. 114. Yeah, there you go.
Should we go on to
Good
temperature?
start. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Because there is something, of course, that you've mentioned earlier, that although you can account for some of the hallucinations, the figures that are seen, the nausea, there are cold spots in this area as well.
Not only that, but I mean, cold spots have often been associated as almost as a precursor of paranormal activity.
Yeah.
The room went suddenly cold. Now, we must talk to Anne about this shortly, because there are a lot of psychological reasons why people feel cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is real objective evidence from proper scientific studies, and we ourselves have seen evidence like this, where instruments, reliable instruments that have been tested and calibrated before and after the event, have recorded enormous temperature drops.
Okay.
So they are real phenomena.
Yeah. Lead on. Onwards and upwards.
We'll do. Thermometers.
Yes.
Temperature. This is a new type of device that we've been using recently for not for the extensive in-depth computer measurements,
Right.
but for as a ready reckoner.
Handheld while you're there. Yeah.
You've seen the laser ones that look like guns and they shoot laser beams. And
Yes. Little red light or circle of red lights.
That's it.
Yeah.
And as we talked about at Derby, they will only take the temperature of a solid object.
Yeah.
The infrared.
In other words, zoom it on there. It will take the temperature.
Yeah.
Of the wall.
And the laser dot is so that you know where it's pointed.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
This one allows us to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It also has another temperature probe built into it that means it can take the temperature of the air.
Which is what it's all about. So in other words, if there's a ghost here in the middle, or so even here against the wall, you want to know the temperature of the area.
No,
where
not if there's a
the
ghost.
is.
But if the temperature, if somebody says, "Oh, I feel really cold now," well then instead of having two thermometers, this little beauty can do it both jobs, and it's half the size of those big gun thermometers, and it's got a rather nice backlit display.
Wow.
Which means you can read it clearly in dark.
In the dark.
We've got the laser.
Oh yeah, same old thing.
So we can read the temperature on the door is 19 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
By pressing one button, the air temperature is 22 degrees.
Right, now where is the air temperature?
It's taken
around.
Yeah, it's taken from a sensor here. One of the problems with this type is that I'm holding it or it's been in my pocket. So the best way to use this is to hold them right at the bottom.
So in other words, if you hold it round there,
You'll heat it up.
You'll heat it, I
the
see.
probe's just inside, so you can get a false high
Yes,
reading.
I see. So hold it at the end, but it is taking the temperature wherever you hold it.
Immediately where it is, not over
Not
there.
at the door.
But when you're using the point and shoot laser
Yeah.
mode, it's taking the temperature of
surface
the
it's touching.
first solid surface it sees, not anything in between.
I see. Yeah.
So, again, to use, first of all, there's one button. It just says scan.
Right.
You just hold it in the palm of your hand, press the button, and it gives you the laser comes on automatically wherever we point
So
it.
the temperature of the door is 19 degrees
We can see
Celsius.
that the temperature of because the building is a nice stable temperature. It's 18,
similar,
19.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
When we let go of that button, the display moves to hold.
Yeah.
So we've got time to write it down.
Oh, I see.
It holds
Right.
that for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, if we want to take the temperature of the air,
Yes.
there's a large button here. It says TAMB or TAMB, temperature ambient.
Yep.
We just press it. The display
And it's
changes
different.
to temperature ambient and it shows me the air temperature.
It's
where-
23.
Where it is now. And there's a little button here that lights up. So
That's
I can
really
read it in
good.
the dark.
That's natty.
When I let go, the light stays on, so I can still got time to knock down the temperature. It's that easy.
Quite good.
Have a
That
try.
was really good.
They're
So,
a
I see.
relatively new device.
We get rid of
It's
that one.
combined.
And how do I get the laser on?
Just press the scan button on the side.
There.
You press that regardless. You have that on whether you're using the ambient button
That's
or
it.
not.
So I've now got scan on. Yeah.
So just press and hold. No, press and hold the scan.
Yeah.
As long as you keep that button held, it's reading the temperature.
But this is the temperature of the air.
Yes, it says temperature ambient.
I see. 23. Let go of it.
That's it.
And then what? How do I get the red light to come on?
Press TAMB. That goes off, and then press the scan button.
I see. Oh, I see. And now we're...
Yeah.
It was a minute ago.
There you go.
That's it. And now that's recording the temperature of 18. Oh, that's easy peasy, really. Tell me something else, Steve. I mentioned earlier about the temperature dropping if there's a ghost, a spirit, something paranormal happening. You record the temperature where the ghost is. Has there ever been any record of where a ghost was, the temperature has dropped? The actual, in other words, the ghost's in the corner. So I go over to the corner and the temperature's dropped.
There's no objective data.
No.
There's subjective data. People say it went suddenly icy cold, and they tend to use dramatic language.
Yeah.
It was like walking into a freezer.
Yeah.
It's unbelievably cold,
Yeah.
but they're describing how they experience the temperature.
Yeah.
And of course, they might be some distance away from where they say the phenomena is taking place.
Yeah, but it's the temperature of the room that drops if there's a spirit in it.
Perhaps, but as we'll hear from Anne shortly, the temperature of the room may not drop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I see. But it's not necessarily, there's a ghost in the corner, put it where the ghost is or was. It's not necessarily a drop in temperature there. It's the whole room.
It could be the whole room. It could be a very... We have seen incidences where the temperature phenomena, the drop in temperature, has been quite localised. Indeed, in this corridor, we did an experiment about a year ago where we had a group of thermometers linked to a computer, and the thermometers were at 1 metre intervals. Again, they were calibrated before and importantly afterwards, and only one thermometer registered a big temperature drop.
Right.
The two either side of it registered a small temperature drop. The others further out down the line registered no temperature change. So that would suggest that that temperature anomaly was a very, very localised event. So the whole corridor didn't drop, just one very particular part. So it may be that if paranormal activity takes place associated with temperature drops, it might be very, very local. It might be in the corner, or it might be the whole room.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily, oh, there's a ghost in there.
Not necessarily, but amateur investigators, by taking good measurements, by noting where they are, by noting what how they're doing the measurements, and by making sure that their equipment has got good batteries and is working properly, will contribute real data. They can make a real contribution to the state of knowledge. All of the big discoveries in science have been made by amateurs.
Oh, yeah, fine.
So investigators who are looking for answers to the paranormal, whether ghosts exist, whether there's an afterlife, or whether it's all flim-flam, the only way of doing it is by getting good, reliable data, by doing good, accurate, proper measurements.
Fantastic.
Paperwork.
Paperwork, my favourite.
Well, unfortunately, Richard, it's one of the most important things we do.
Corner.
Without the paperwork, there's no point doing anything.
I know what you're saying.
Right, the first thing we've got here for you is a chart to record the temperature.
Right.
So when you're doing all your temperatures, we need you to keep a record. We normally get people to do 15-minute temperature checks just as a baseline.
Right. Yep.
But then if you feel that the temperature's changing in any way, if you suddenly feel colder or even warmer, start taking measurements a lot more regularly. Every few seconds if you feel that the temperature's changing quite significantly, because if it is changing, we need to keep a record of it.
Right, yeah.
But of course, you might think the temperature's changing, but when you measure it, it actually isn't. Because especially when we're doing ghost hunts, there's a lot of things you need to look out for. First of all, you'll be sitting somewhere, just taking in the environment, and people don't do that very much. You don't sit at home, you're watching the telly, you're reading a book, doing something. And there's lots of little subtle drafts and breezes that we're not normally aware of, but when you're sitting there with nothing else to concentrate on, you become very aware of them. So a little breeze can feel quite strong, and it feels like the temperature's changing significantly. Also, if we're doing a ghost hunt overnight, as you're getting tireder, your body temperature will start to drop. We've talked about this before when we were at the jail. So if you start to feel cold, it might just be because you're very tired. And the way we'll know that is if you keep a record of the actual air temperature around you.
So
we
it could
can
be
see
you,
it
not
could
the
be
temperature
you,
around you.
not the temperature around you. But we won't know that unless you keep a record. So it's
not.
very important that you keep a record.
Yep.
And at the same time, we need you to keep a record of the EMF.
Yes.
Same principle, we need to have the baseline readings. Again, we'd like you to take them about every 15 minutes. But if they do start to change, start taking them more regularly. So we've got a record of how they're changing.
I see, yeah.
We do have equipment that will record these automatically, but you're sitting in the field, you know if something appears to be happening, you can keep a record of it. So we know if something's happening in the environment around you.
I see, yeah.
We also have plans of the building.
Yep.
This is so we know where you're sitting. And if anything happens, we know exactly where it's happening.
Yes.
You need to make a note of where you're sitting. And if anything happens, if you hear a sound, if you actually see a ghost, we need you to mark it on the plan.
Right,
If
yes.
it's something that moves, make a note of the direction it's moving in.
Yep, yeah.
So that we can see exactly where things are happening.
I
Because there's
see.
no point you coming back at the end of the session and saying, I saw a figure, it was over there somewhere.
Right, I see.
We need to know exactly where it is
Yeah.
and where you were sitting
So,
as
for
well.
example, I mean, we know for a fact that this area here is very active. This is the corridor that we came
That's
down.
right.
This is where we did the talk of the EMF, and there is where the electric meters are on the other side of it.
That's right.
Yeah. So, in other words, you mark down exactly where. So, if someone saw a ghost here, for instance, it went that way. You mark it, and you see it went through the wall there.
That's right.
You mark the whole thing down.
That's right. And then we know exactly where it went and we can go and have a look
Yeah.
and see what might
Yeah.
be going
And then,
on
of course,
there.
you come back and say, well, hang on a minute. That's the area where there's a high EMF reading. This is why you may be seeing the ghost there.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
And of course, we keep all these every time we come back here.
Yes.
So we've got all these records from all the hours we've
Yeah,
been here,
yeah.
and we can then try and see if there's patterns, if people are seeing things in certain locations, which is what alerted us to this.
Yeah.
Staff had reported things here. We were getting the plans back from our investigators saying things were happening there. So we could then go and have a look and see if there was something in the environment that was causing something.
Gotcha.
How are you getting on?
All right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you think he's okay with the paperwork?
yeah.
I think I've persuaded
Well,
him.
I wondered if there was a possibility I could actually have someone with me to do the paperwork.
You
because
will, no, that's not allowed. You have to do your
see,
own.
my
paperwork.
wife keeps telling me how much I dislike paperwork.
We one of the things that, from going back to safety earlier,
Yeah.
is we never ever allow investigators to sit on their own.
Yep.
Two reasons. If the ghost comes down the corridor and you see it, we've only got your word for it.
Right.
If there are two of you there, it's two sets of information.
Gotcha.
Also for safety.
Yeah.
And there's a third reason, it's a little more subtle, it stops you falling asleep, because we don't expect you to sit in the dark, on your own, quiet. You'll fall asleep within minutes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So what we've always allowed our investigators to do is they can talk quietly to the person that they're with. They can chat about anything they want to do. Keeps them alert, keeps them occupied. And we found from the records and can verify that people don't miss even small things that happen because they are more alert.
Yes, of course. Yeah, yeah.
So you will be sitting with somebody and you'll be able to talk quietly.
Because again, as we've said so often, ghostly occurrences usually happen when you least expect it, when you're going about your business, doing whatever, talking to people, interacting with them, all of a sudden something happens. Not when you're sitting there, staring, very solemn, waiting for the ghost to come.
Absolutely. You do that, what's going to happen now?
Absolutely nothing. If
You'll be asleep in minutes.
and you'll be.
Yeah.
However, if you do fall asleep, if you have any dreams, we need you to make a note of them when you wake up, because
Right.
those might be significant as well.
Of course.
Time to do a ghost hunt now.
Oh, come on then.
Let's go.
Let's go in the dark.
Very dark in here, isn't it?
Exceptionally
It
dark.
is, but we've just come out of a lit corridor, so
Oh, of course.
you can see as we look around us, there's quite a lot of ambient light from security lighting. All of the walls, all four walls in this room, because it was a drawing office, are made of glass.
Yeah.
And this has created some problems for the investigation.
That's right. It's something you need to be aware of, that because there's quite a lot of ambient light coming from outside, it's very easy to see shapes and figures on the walls.
Yes.
As there's traffic going past, we have birds and bats going past, and just the very level of light is not quite enough for you to see properly, so you're slightly into your natural night vision, which means you will be perceiving things at the edge of your vision that aren't really there.
Right.
So it's one of the things that we do have to be careful of here.
Yeah.
It's a very long room as well.
It's huge, isn't it?
It's over 100 feet in length.
Gosh.
What's interesting is, if you're here during the day, it's just an empty room full of old filing cabinets and full of desks. Objects that we know, and they're no threat at all. Now, as we look down the length of this building, it's still full of desks and filing cabinets. But because the lighting is now so low, these have taken on unfamiliar shapes.
It's a room full of dark
Threatening,
shapes and
threatening.
shadows.
It's like the jumper over the bedpost that suddenly becomes a monster in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think is they are unusual shapes, and that does, and knows from our records and notes, that as the light goes down, as it gets darker, people get more and more leery about a space.
Yes.
The familiar becomes unfamiliar.
Especially in this type of lighting, because interestingly, if you have somewhere that's pitch black, people aren't scared. It's when there's this sort of level of lighting where you're not quite sure if you've seen something or not that people find the most scary.
I can understand that.
So we need to sit you down, get you set up with your paperwork, get you comfortable in a chair.
And leave you to it.
Thank you very much.
We're rather not going to leave you to it, everyone. We're going to put you in with
You will be
one
with
of
an
our investigation
experienced
team.
member.
Thank you so much.
That's good for doing.
Okay.
Richard, can I introduce you to the rest of some of the Parascience team?
Hi.
We have Dawn,
Hi.
we have Stuart,
Hi, Stuart.
both long-term investigators, and of course, one of the longest served of all, Helen.
Hi, Helen. Now, I know for a fact that you are the youngest paranormal investigator in the country. Is that right, Steve?
She started at 4.
Oh, my
and
goodness
she's
me.
10 now.
And still searching for ghosts.
Absolutely.
And tell me something. What's the take on actually having young children in dark places at night looking for ghosts?
Well, obviously we wouldn't recommend that everyone takes a small child out with them because it can be quite frightening. However, Helen has been out on quite a few occasions with us during the daytime as well. She's not frightened. We don't take her to all investigations, but certain selected ones we do take her out because children have a valid viewpoint. A lot of the reports that we get are from children. Their parents phone us up and say, our child's had an experience. And it's perfectly valid to try and get a child's view because they see the world differently from us. They haven't got all the preconceived ideas that we have. So we think it is valid to take a child out with us just on occasion to see what their viewpoint is.
I mean, their minds are much more open than ours. And let's be quite honest with you, children do see ghosts frequently. Mums and dads refer to them as imaginary friends.
That's correct.
But I believe that they're actually seeing ghosts. So, what do we do now, chaps?
We've got your paperwork.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We have somewhere where your EMF meter.
Yep.
We have your thermometer.
Thank you very much.
They're exactly the same as the rest of the team
Yeah,
are using.
yeah.
They have radio communications. Anne and I are off to set up another investigation point in another room.
Yep.
And we'll see you in about an hour for a tea break.
Okay. See you in a bit.
All right.
Let's hope something happens, shall we? See you in a bit. Oh, very cool. Now, normally, I have to say, when this is a recliner. The problem I have, I sometimes go to sleep.
It's all right. Don't worry, we'll keep you awake.
So what you have to do, of course, is keep talking, keep me awake, doing tests all the time, baseline tests,
Yes,
checking
yes.
all the time.
Yes, we take all the temperature readings and the EMF readings at regular intervals. And obviously, if something happens during the night, we'll, even if we've just taken a reading, we'll recheck the readings to make sure that there's no fluctuations at all.
I see. So, what do we do? Sit back and
And relax.
wait
Take
for the
it
ghosts
in.
to appear, hopefully.
Yeah, we can talk in a whisper so that,
Yeah, because obviously you've got to be careful about disturbing people
That's
in other parts of the
That's
building at the same
right,
time.
yes. I mean, there are certain areas where we're not allowed to walk around purely because if someone's below us, they're going to hear us, so we've got to be careful.
Yeah,
And
so it's just sort of very a whisper,
that's right.
which is difficult for me, and keep chatting away, and all of a sudden,
Yes.
who knows,
And
something
really
might
just
happen.
sort of keeping an eye out. Even if you're talking, just keeping an eye out what's around
Yeah,
about, really.
I see.
And I mean, if you do actually witness something, it's important not to say something, oh, did you see that?
Ah,
Because, we don't want to
lead them up the same path, if you
That's
like.
right.
Oh, yes, I saw that too.
That's right. It's like, you can say, oh, did you just see what, I've seen over there or whatever, and
With-
let them...
With it and say, yes, I saw a man in a top hat and a black coat over there, rather than saying, did you see that man in a black hat and a cloak over there?
That's right.
'Cause they- oh, yes, I did.
Yeah.
Exactly the same as you did.
Because it's so easy to,
I
for
see.
people to...
But you have actually had experiences in here, haven't you?
Yes. I mean, even while I've been sitting here before you came up, I'm sort of getting shadows out the corner of my eye.
Really?
Yeah, so...
So there is a possibility that sitting here tonight, I might see something.
You never know.
Whoa, can't wait.
EVP, electronic voice phenomena.
Yes.
Been around since the 1950s. Discovered by a guy out recording birdsong.
Correct.
Voices. EVP has always relied upon another noise source, a running tap, the wind blowing through the leaves, white noise.
White noise, yes.
Television, that's a traditional one.
Yeah.
Everybody remembers it from the movie.
Yeah.
You have a noise source, and the theory is that using a concept called stochastic resonance, the spirits can then use that energy to add their voices to the recorder.
Right.
However, the Americans call all recordings made by microphones, camera microphones, standalone microphones, EVP. They're not, they're ITC, instrumental transcommunication.
Oh, right.
EVP is when you add a noise source. ITC is when you just have a microphone on a camera or on a cassette recorder, in this case on a digital recorder.
Oh, well, see, you learn something every day, don't you?
So, I mean, yeah, it's not wrong to call it EVP,
No.
but it just, we like to do things properly, so let's give them proper names.
Why not? Great. So from now on, I shall refer to it as ITC.
Unless you're using a white noise source.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yeah.
In which case it's EVP.
Okay.
The simplest way to do it, the modern way to do it, of course, is the digital voice recorder.
All right.
Small, effective. We have small plug-in microphones. These cost around £5.
Right.
And they're much better than the inbuilt microphones.
Of course.
Simply
Yes,
plug
indeed.
in.
Yeah.
So we get much better. Now, short recordings are much better.
That's what I've always understood. 2 minutes, something like that. Ask a question.
What-
Sometimes, is there someone there?
wait
Would you
for
like
a
to speak to
reply.
us? Wait for a reply. A
Ask
couple of
another
minutes.
question.
Then ask again.
Then listen.
Because if you switch that on and leave it, if you could, for 24 hours, who's got time to sit and listen to it all? So short bursts, I'm told, are the correct things, yeah?
There's a problem with that, though.
Right,
If I say, is there anybody there? And it records a noise.
yeah?
If I say, is there anybody, what is the most likely response that you're going to come up with?
Well, you can only get yes, you certainly can't get no.
And so there's an expectation, isn't there?
Yes,
Digital recorders, all is not lost.
Right.
Digital recorders, well, in fact, cassette recorders, but this just makes it easier. They allow us to do a little bit of experimentation. Most people at home have got a computer.
yes,
So we record us saying, is there anybody there? And we have a noise. But is it somebody saying yes? We can find out. People can find out very easily. They record themselves saying yes. What they then do is they play the two sounds into the computer. Now, even the most basic Windows computer have got a media player that has a little graph analyzer. So you can see directly, does the sound that you've got that you think is the word yes look like the real word yes? It's not perfect, it's a bit rough and ready, and to do it properly you would need a lot more expensive software,
yeah.
but it's a basic test that people can do using these. So you can be a little bit more confident that it's a word and not a bird or a dog barking.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Now, tell me something else, because I've always been told in the past that to use the old-fashioned tape recorder is sometimes better, the old piano key type cassette player. Is there anything in that or not?
There is a sound logic in that idea, because a digital recorder, most of them record, modern ones record as an MP3 file.
Right.
An MP3 file is compressed to take up less space.
Yes.
It does that by removing some of the audio above and below the normal range of hearing. And you think, well, that doesn't really matter. But when you look at it on a computer,
Yes.
there's bits chopped out.
Yeah.
An analog, a cassette, an old-fashioned one, doesn't do that. You get all of the audio.
So it could be better to use an
It could be
old-fashioned one.
better, but they're noisier.
Yeah.
So if it's a quiet sound,
Yeah.
there might be so much noise on the track anyway that you lose the benefit.
I see. Swings and roundabouts.
A recorder that uses PCM files, WAV files, or ones that aren't compressed, files that aren't MP3 files. If you have the option to choose the highest setting. For example, this little digital recorder, I can record up to 8 hours,
All right.
but the quality is almost unbearably dreadful.
Right.
I can turn it to its highest quality and it will last 2 hours, and it sounds really crisp, really clear. So you've got to set it right.
Yeah. But for 2 minutes, you're all right with that.
For 2 minutes.
There's another technique that you haven't mentioned that some people say works, which is to do it every day at the same time. So you
Right.
don't just sit down and randomly try it. You try it. You might have to try it for weeks, for months, but do it at the same time every night for the same period of time. The theory being that if there is someone trying to communicate, if you set up a regular pattern, they might then come through.
The early researchers who had some apparently astounding... there are CDs available with EVP from these early periods, and they're amazing. Amazing, the quality. These people say they had to wait weeks of continually doing it day after day after day before they became successful. So simply to walk in and go, is there anybody there? Speak to me now. Oh, I didn't get anything.
Highly unlikely that you will. Got to persevere at the whole thing. The same with the whole thing of ghost hunting, though. You have to persevere.
The beauty of EVP is you can do that at home.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
It's an experiment. Any investigator, anybody interested in the paranormal can simply do at home. Most people have got some form of recorder.
Yeah.
If they haven't, they've got a computer that's got a microphone and a recorder inbuilt into it. They've got a radio for white noise. People can try these experiments at home. It's a dead easy one to do.
Fantastic.
But persistence seems to be the key with EVP.
Right.
That rhymed as well.
Very good. Excellent.
Cup of tea?
Cup of tea. Definitely time for tea.
Well, Richard, we hope we've given you a flavour of a paranormal investigation.
Just a bit.
We have only scratched the surface. We've only looked at EMF, we've only looked at temperature, and we've only looked at the importance of record keeping.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. There's so much more, isn't there? I mean,
There is an awful lot more, but hopefully we've given people enough to at least give them a good start.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my favourites, of course, infrasound, we haven't been able to touch on. There's obviously room for at least one more DVD.
Well, at least one more DVD.
I think so. So watch this space, folks. I just hope that you've enjoyed watching the DVD as much as I've enjoyed making it. And my very special thanks to Parascience, all of your group, and to the two of you, to Anne and to Steve. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fantastic.
We've enjoyed it as well.
We have.
Thanks for coming.
And thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks very much indeed.